Thanks again for joining us tonight. One of the favorite rhythms that I have been a part of, I guess, here from the beginning is that we oftentimes have guest speakers, either guests from the outside of our community or guests from the inside of our community. We actually have a plethora of preaching talent and preaching calling here in our church, which I'm thankful for. Not only does it give me a break, but it allows me a chance to learn from other people and allows you a chance to learn from people who aren't me, which I think is a really good thing for all of us. So tonight is one of those nights where we get a chance to continue in our Empire series and hear from Sue Bailey. Her and her husband Brent have been a part of our church for about a year now, and Bree, their daughter, has been an apprentice with us for about 3/4 of a year at this point. So anyway, that's as much introduction as I'll do. So would you please put your hands together and give Sue Bailey a warm Inglewood welcome.
Thank you, Nathan. It's good to be here. I am just humbled by hearing everything that y'all did on Saturday. It's amazing. So I have been studying the concept of leadership for years. And without fail, every book I read, every lecture I go to mentions integrity as an essential quality for Christians and all great leaders in general. So integrity is kind of a word that's thrown around a lot, and its true meaning is often misunderstood. So what it actually means is being consistent, truthful, integrated in one's beliefs, in your words, and your actions, regardless of the situation. Integrity stems from the Latin word integer, which means whole or complete. So being a person of integrity requires an inner sense of wholeness and a constancy of character. And I'm going somewhere with this. You project resolve on the outside, and on the inside, you have peace. You're a unified you. When you're whole and consistent, there's only one you. You bring that same you with you wherever you go, regardless of the circumstance. You don't leave part of yourself behind. So you don't have a work you and a family you and a social you and a church you. You get my drift. You are you all the time. And when you're living in the state of integrity, people should be able to visibly see it through your actions, your words, your decisions, your methods, and your outcomes. So tonight, as we revisit the book of Daniel, we're going to discover that this was Daniel's witness. Whether he was wielding power or he was succumbing to the power of pagan kings, Daniel shows us how to consistently respond to power with integrity. In fact, he's one of the few people in the Bible that nothing negative is written about. He's not perfect, right? Because no one is. But he has constantly demonstrates faith, prayer, courage, constancy, and a lack of compromise. Daniel encourages us to be in integrity, even when we have to make difficult choices. We're in challenging situations, or we're being harassed or mocked or even persecuted for our faith. And he does this by reminding us that we serve this God, this kingdom that doesn't end. Empires are going to come, empires are going to go, but God's kingdom persists. And Daniel is a living example. So our scripture for this evening, now that we're there, is Daniel 6, the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Now I'm assuming most of you guys have heard this story. Show of hands? Okay. So I'm going to give you a little background, quick recap, and then we're going to jump into the text. So as Nathan shared last week, the book of Daniel is an account of Daniel's 70 years of captivity in Babylon as a Jewish exile. Did you catch that? He was actually in captivity for 70 years. 70 years. I mean, 25 years is something, right? 70 years. During those many years, Daniel endured a wicked culture, and he was forced to serve idolatrous kings. Maybe not so different than some of us feel today. But what is so amazing about this man, Daniel, is that whether he was in a position of power or he was under power, he maintained his integrity with God, and God honored his faithfulness. So in the text before us, Daniel is in his 80s now. Remember, he was taken as a teenager. He's in his third round of kings. And the new king, Darius, who is probably also known as Cyrus, has positioned Daniel as one of 3 administrators, over 120 governors, over this huge empire. And we are told that he actually trusts Daniel so much, he's going to put him in charge of the whole kingdom. Now, as the story goes, Daniel's non-Jewish colleagues become rather jealous of his potential new post, so they scheme to get rid of him. They can't find any fault with him, but they know he's a religious man. So they convince the king to enact this decree, right? Saying they can't pray to anyone except the king. Now, once that decree is made, Daniel chooses to continue to pray and give thanks to God, just like he always has. Now, when he's caught, which is inevitable, his spiteful co-workers tell the king is forced to obey his own decree, and he reluctantly throws Daniel into the den of hungry lions. The next morning, the king finds Daniel alive, right? Finds Daniel alive. The cats didn't touch him. And the king is elated, actually. He subsequently eliminates Daniel's enemies, throws them and their families, by the way, into the lion's den. Then he changes the decree so that all people in all nations will worship the king, or the God, not the king, God of Daniel. So what a story. I mean, you remember hearing this as a kid? I mean, is this for real? Is Daniel for real? Well, let's find out. Follow along as Brianna reads Daniel. She's going to start in 6 verse 10 and then go through 26. The account of Daniel and the lion's den.
Now then Daniel learned that the decree had been published. He went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel, praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 years, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? Daniel answered, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you, Bree. So the overarching theme of Daniel is the sovereignty of God. But what I want to focus on tonight is the man. What is it about this man, Daniel, that allowed him to maintain his identity, retain his integrity, and literally remain unscathed when he was tossed in as a main course for a bunch of hungry cats. Specifically, what can Daniel teach us about how to stand firm in times of trial? How can you, as the old adage goes, you've probably heard this, dare to be Daniels, right? Or as Nathan challenged us last week, practice biblical rebellion, even when we feel like we're in a fiery furnace or we're being tossed to a bunch of lions. Well, we're going to look at three concepts tonight. We're going to look at Daniel's character, Daniel's actions, and his triumph. C-A-T. Okay, I know. We love acronyms around here. CAT. So lion's a big cat. I'm sure you, okay, I know it's lame, but hopefully it's memorable. What do we know about Daniel's character? Well, we're told that Daniel had exceptional qualities that set him apart from everyone else. Trustworthy, diligent, excellent spirit about him. He was faithful. He was faultless. And actually, he was just a person of integrity. Daniel was visibly whole and unswerving in his character. Remember integer. He was consistent and truthful in his beliefs, his words, and his actions, regardless of the situation. He lived in integrity toward God, toward his fellow Jews, and integrity with the pagan culture in which he was dwelling. Similarly, here at the Sacred Grace, and actually I didn't hear it tonight, but here every week we talk about living up to God, right? And in toward one another and out toward the world. And what does it mean to actually do that with integrity? What can we learn from Daniel? Well, living a life of integrity before God means we choose to be honest and authentic with him. It's not always easy. I mean, like Daniel, we have to talk to God and we have to listen to God. And when we pray, we need to be real. We need to be real. You know, bring our hidden sins before him, our thoughts and the things, the problems of our heart, because prayer is important. And Daniel wasn't perfect, but he was a man of prayer. And this is one way we can honestly live up toward God with integrity. What about in toward one another? Living with other believers requires that we're genuine with one another, we're vulnerable with one another, with those at the Sacred Grace, and as was mentioned, at church at large. But this isn't always easy, is it? Quite frankly, it gets really messy, and none of us live with integrity with one another 100% of the time. We try to be consistent and Christ-like in what we say and how we act with one another, but we mess up. I know this is true of me. I mean, sometimes our emotions get the best of us, and we can't manage our behavior. We end up reacting to people instead of responding to people well. I do this. I get frustrated. I mean, to be honest, I get frustrated when people don't agree with me about things that I'm really passionate about. Like women in ministry. Not everybody agrees with that. I get very frustrated, and occasionally I respond less charitably than I should. I'm downright snarky. And my actions don't line up with my belief, right? Because I actually believe I'm supposed to turn the other cheek and I'm supposed to pray for my enemies. But do I always do this? No. Ask anyone who knows me. What's telling, though, is that our character, what's really telling, is how we respond when we mess up, when we're not characterized by integrity. What do? Do we quickly redeem the situation? Do we get back to that wholeness, acknowledge our stuff, our inconsistencies, maybe apologize, ask for forgiveness? If you're like me, stopping when you're in the heat of the moment and you're not upset with someone is really hard to do. But this is what it looks like to live with integrity with the family of God. We have to strive to live at peace with one another. I love what Aaron said. About living in peace. And what about the world? How do we live in integrity as we live in the world, you've heard, but not become like the world? I think this is especially difficult. I wonder sometimes as I navigate this, and you might as well, that sometimes I don't give myself permission to be my real you, the real you, that integrated person. Sometimes because I think out of fear of what other people will think. For example, if you work someplace that people don't share your faith, I mean, do you avoid having hard discussions or talking about things like politics or your view of immigration or your commitment to the poor, or where you go on Sunday evenings. You're not watching the Broncos, which is amazing. You're here at the Sacred Grace. Let's face it, being and living in wholeness and maintaining integrity in the world is not an easy thing to do. And functioning in the world system with integrity, it's just easier sometimes to get kind of complacent. It is for me. And do what everyone else is doing. But the trouble with being in the rat race is, even if you win, you're still a rat. Our inability as Christians to be consistent in our beliefs, words, and actions is one excuse people give sometimes for not coming into the church. I don't know how many times people have told me, well, I don't want to go to church because it's full of a bunch of hypocrites, right? And normally, in the right situation, I'd say, hey, don't let that keep you away. There's always room for one more. It's hard being consistent, right, in our beliefs and our actions. It's just not easy. And I have to say, after I've been here, Nathan said, I think we've been around for about a year. I have witnessed, and yesterday is just amazing, that many of you being consistent with your beliefs and then actually doing things in your actions. And when you do that, you show the love of Christ to people around you. And that is what it means to live a life of integrity. Ultimately, when you take that posture and you influence people because they're drawn to you. And when they're drawn to you, you can point them to Christ. So whether you're in a position of power in the world or you're under the power of another, we still need to maintain our integrity in front of God. And if we continuously do this, then we're going to get better at being able to move into God and in toward one another and out toward the world with integrity. And we're going to exhibit more of the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and for me, I'm hoping and praying, self-control. When I see God-loving people of integrity, I recognize them. I mean, don't you? And that is what Daniel is. That's what he shows us. His character, the C of cat, I'm coming back to it, right, was that of integrity, and his actions lined up with his character. So we're told that his enemies were jealous of him, they wanted to destroy him, but they couldn't find anything wrong with his actions or his conduct. Wish that were true of me. So they played on the vanity of the king and devised this plan to get Darius to make a law that would surely incriminate Daniel. 30 days. Couldn't pray to anyone but the king. And Daniel responded by being faithful. He acted in a way consistent with his beliefs and with his character. So when the king signed that decree, Daniel had a choice. Should he remain faithful to the Lord? Should he bow down to the vanity of the king? Oftentimes we have choices. Daniel chose to do exactly what he always had been doing. He really wasn't trying to make a public statement. He was just simply continuing this godly pattern that had got him through his entire 80-something years of life. He responded with integrity. And ultimately, he shows us, as followers of Jesus, how to live in this world and the world systems without getting assimilated or sucked in, right, or being conformed to the world and imitating the abuse and misuse of power that we see oftentimes all around us. So when our faith is challenged, maybe we don't need to make a public statement, or for me, even a reply. Maybe we just need to spend some more time in prayer. That's one thing I really appreciate about the Sacred Grace, is the prayers of the people, the time that we spend doing that. It is so powerful. And that's exactly what Daniel did here. He just kept on praying and doing exactly what he had done before. And I want to step back for just a moment, because I don't want us to, I don't want to miss this. You know, before he was thrown into the lion's den, he was in a position of power, right? He could have done something different. He could have made other choices. He could have been complacent. He could have been compromising, or just compliant. And I want us just to consider for a minute, how would we have responded in a situation like that? Think about it. So we're in this position of power, right? And this is hard for me to envision, but top administrator of this huge empire. And we could be thinking to ourselves, God has put me here, and he wants to use me here. Surely he doesn't want me to die right off. So maybe I just kind of go underground with my praying, just don't do it for a few days. And that way I'll be able to continue to serve him where he's put me in this empire. That would be a compromise. Would we have compromised? Or consider the limited duration of the ban. I really had to think about this. So say we were on a dictator's rule, and prayer was banned for 30 days. Prayer, banned. How many prayers would we miss? For Daniel, right? He prayed, he was a Jew, as Brianna read, he prayed 3 times a day. That was for 30 days. You do the math. 90, right? 90 long prayers. Would I miss 90 prayers? I had to think about that. Prayer is a privilege. Not that our prayers need to look like Daniel necessarily. I mean, I think being on your knees is an amazing posture, but just being able to talk to God and journal or trying something like praying the scriptures. Prayer is important. And if you ever get stuck with prayer, you can talk to Nathan or one of the intern pastors. I mean, the fact is, in choosing to pray, because it was a choice, Daniel was biblically rebellious. Daniel broke the law of the king, didn't he? But Daniel didn't break the law of the Lord. Daniel did what the Lord commanded, even when it contradicted what the government demanded. Honestly, we might face the same dilemma, or maybe you already have. I mean, Romans 13 teaches us to submit to governing authorities, right? But when their laws contradict the law of God, we have to obey God's laws with wisdom and in peace, regardless of the consequences. Daniel was determined to stand for that which was right simply because it was right. He was determined, and can get that out, to remain faithful whatever the cost, even if it cost him his life. But we know the end of the story, right? Daniel triumphed. Okay, that's the T. He triumphed. Back to the cat. And God honored his faithfulness. He rescued him from these devouring cats, rescued from hungry lions. Seriously? Is this real? I was wondering, are there really den of lions in the time of the Babylonians? Well, apparently there were. Lion hunting used to be something that the kings would do. And so they would keep lions on hand in a den, not unlike they do in the Great Britain, or did in Great Britain with fox hunting. So it's been documented in history that lions were there. Not only that, but it was one way to dispose of undesirable members of your court. Throw them into the lion's den, both in Persian times and in Roman times. So yeah, the account was not only plausible, it was historical reality. Daniel is not just a story in your youth. Daniel is real. It's a historical, real story. And the man Daniel is a real man. Daniel demonstrates what it means to be people of character for us, and how important it is for us to have our character line up with our actions, to have our beliefs line up, regardless of the circumstances that we're under. He shows us how to stand firm in times of trial, with integrity, to maintain integrity, even when you and I feel pressed, which we do, by the surrounding culture. So whether right now you feel like you're in a position of power or you feel like you're under power, Daniel really gives us insights into how to posture ourselves so that we can work in the world's system. We don't separate ourselves. We want to work in the system, right? And still maintain integrity as a citizen of God's kingdom. You and I can be Daniels, even when we feel like we're being thrown into the hungry lions, by imitating Daniel's character, by emulating his actions, and by embracing the truth of his triumph. We need to remember, God is sovereign, and empires are going to come and they're going to go, but God's kingdom endures forever. And what I'd like to do is just pray the end that Brianna didn't read, verse 27. Will you pray it with me? It's the last This is the last slide. When you're ready. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. And brothers and sisters, he will ultimately rescue us as well. Amen.